Call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed further, I'd like to acknowledge that the meeting that we're all participating in, wherever we are in the town of Fort Erie, is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Noyes.
Okay, and I think we anticipate her coming. There's no addendum this evening. Just a couple of very brief announcements. Recently, the E.J. Freeland Community Center opened under the operation of the Boys and Girls Club. And they've also, I believe, been participating in the opening recently of the Kinsman Pool as well for the people of our community. But I did want to thank the individuals who stepped forward during the darkest hours of the situation at the E.J. Freeland Community Center and offered to assist and did assist the town of Fort Erie during the time when we were negotiating with the Niagara Y in terms of the building and the facilities and the equipment. And they offered to assist us in a number of ways, and some of them will continue to assist the community center. So I wanted to thank Bev Arbor, Joan Christensen, Glenn Finbow, Mark Griffiths, Kazi Maroof, Stu McLeod, Tara Lee McLean, Ted Ogilvie, Rebecca Parton, Karen Vandermeulen, and councillors Kim Zanko and Nick Dubanow for the time and energy that they committed to ensuring that this very valuable facility is now part of the town's operations and is under very reliable management by the Boys and Girls Club, who have plans to expand the services available there and of course make them available not only for primarily adults, but also for the children in our community. The second announcement that I had really relates in general terms to the work of the town staff under the guidance of our CAO, Tom Cookett, during the period of state of emergency, which has existed really in the town of Fort Erie, although it wasn't declared until early April, existed from mid-March when the staff had to step in and start to manage what was a growing health issue, not only in Fort Erie, but in Niagara. And in terms of the work that they've done, they've managed not only their regular schedules and the work that arises out of that, from planning to infrastructure services to finances, and the list goes on. They also had to step forward and manage the town's operations during an extreme crisis, which the pandemic has been, and it continues. And so as we gradually open, I want to acknowledge the work of the town's emergency operations team, the senior staff, and the individuals in mid-management who've been involved in that, all under the very, very competent and confident leadership of our CAO. So Mr. Cookett, on behalf of council, I want to thank you and your staff for the good work that they've done and the position that they've put the town of Fort Erie in relative to this pandemic. That takes us then to declarations of pecuniary interest. And good evening, Councillor Noyes. I see you're with us now. You haven't missed anything. If there are no declarations of pecuniary interest, there's a couple of upcoming public meetings that appear on our agenda with respect to notice. One is draft plan of subdivision and combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, which would be a second public meeting for the Royal Ridge Phase 2, which is the Royal Oak Property Developments application. That meeting will be held by video conference on Thursday, August the 27th, 2020. And I presume that there will be a report available for the public prior to that. Is that correct, Ms. Schofield? Would you know?
Yes, it'll be available on August 27th.
Okay. And then there's a second public meeting that's scheduled with respect to 0 Burley Road North. And that is a small parcel of property on Burley Road. That meeting will take place Monday, August 31st, 2020 at 6 p.m. Again, via video teleconference, and the report will be available Thursday, August 27th, 2020. I see, Madam Clerk, that you've corrected me very adroitly. The public meeting with respect to Oak property is August the 31st, 2020. The report will be available August 27th. I guess I should spend more time reading the agenda. And then there's also a property rezoning public meeting with respect to Town Line Road. And that is a property owned by 550075 Ontario Limited, Joseph Zavodsky. That meeting will take place on September 2nd, 2020, again by video conference, and the report for information purposes will be available Thursday, August the 27th, 2020. This was a meeting that had originally been scheduled March the 23rd, but has been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are no public meetings scheduled for this evening. That takes us to the consent agenda. And I'm wondering if there's anyone who wishes any of the reports removed from the consent agenda to be dealt with separately. If not, then could I have a mover for the reports and recommendations, Councillor Dubanow? So the reports are on the floor for any questions or comments. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I had a question on report number CAO 14-2020, the BIA Incremental Marketing Fund Program from 2020. I did have an opportunity to talk to Kimberly about this in regards to that. It's not just like in this particular case, it affects the BIAs, the money and the changes in that, but there's other programs in place to help all businesses, whether they're part of the BIA or not. I wonder if Kimberly could explain it much better than I can, I'm sure.
Sure. Ms. Grummett.
Sure. Good evening through you to the Councillor. So we did launch, we will be launching later this week, a Shop Local campaign that will that focuses on exploring local, shopping local, and eating local. And that initiative supports all businesses in the Fort Erie area in all sectors. So there's a number of tactics that we'll be undertaking to execute that plan. Notably, it's a social media campaign through Facebook and Instagram, and they're targeted cellular ads that are focusing on shopping local and our residents, encouraging our residents to shop local and support our businesses. So that's in addition to the BIA program.
Councillor Noyes.
That's all. Thank you.
Are there any other questions with respect to any of the reports? Ms. Dolch, I had a question or questions and a little concern about report PDS 34-2020, which is the region's comprehensive review agricultural systems mapping report. And in particular, wondering, although I know that the vast amount of these lands that appear on the maps as being designated for future agricultural currently are, I guess, in the agricultural inventory, how much of that would be affected by the wetland mapping that was done 15, 16 years ago and really wouldn't be developable regardless?
Thank you. I can't give you an exact number, but it's quite a significant amount. Obviously, the wetland areas that were identified back in 2006 by the province took a large chunk of our agricultural industrial areas out of play in terms of developable futures, in terms of industrial or agricultural use. You do still have some ability to farm the properties around those wetland areas. But again, it is a substantial loss with those wetlands in the agricultural area. But I can provide you further detail on the exact number. I just don't have it readily available.
Right, and if I might, for all intents and purposes, the areas that are designated here for inclusion in prime agricultural lands for the new official plan, whenever it's passed, are greatly reflective of what's already designated in the official plan as prime agricultural land. Is that correct?
That's correct. Everything in green currently is what we have shown, maybe minus a few things, in particular along the Niagara River Parkway. We don't show that as agricultural, the region does.
Right, in the area around the high school, which I guess is also shown as being coming out. And then just for clarification, the pink areas on the map, those are areas that the region would like to include in prime agricultural land?
Those are areas the province would like to include. We had further discussion with the region. They were supportive of our approach that we didn't feel those candidate areas should be included, and they are supporting us on that. But the province did include them as candidate areas at this point.
And I'm sure they came down and checked the soil to make sure that you can grow something other than corn or soy. So any area that isn't designated as green, which includes some of the existing urban boundaries, but also includes land between and outside some of these existing urban boundaries, those would be areas for potential expansion of the urban boundaries in years to come, provided they're not somehow limited because of environmental reasons.
That's correct. Obviously, long-term, right now, we have a large supply, but there is still some need identified by the region for future boundary expansion for residential. So those areas, obviously outside the urban boundary, are the areas we have to look at. So it's possible they could be in some of these green areas or in the hatched areas as the new plan is proposing.
Right. And these are issues as well that I will raise at the region with the planning committee on which I sit. Are there any other questions that any other members have with respect to any of the reports in the consent agenda? If not, then I'll call the question. I note that we had a very good first quarter in terms of building permits. And I'm presuming that that doesn't include permits that were held up once the province declared its state of emergency and there was a moratorium on the issuance of building permits. Is that correct, Ms. Dolch?
That's correct. We had a bit of obviously we were trying to get up and running when COVID hit, digital submissions, things like that. So it did slow things. We did get a record number of single family homes being submitted in Q1, but in terms of the other types of permits, they were a bit slower getting going, but they've picked up.
My understanding is now that we've completed quarter two, that there were also some healthy permit numbers for residences during the second quarter.
That's correct.
Okay, but we'll have to wait for the final numbers for the next installment. Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations and the reports in the consent agenda? None opposed. That is carried. That then takes us to Planning and Development Services, and that is Councillor Zanko.
Yes,
Perfect.
thank you. Thank you. Planning and Development Services is now in session. We don't have any presentations or delegations. We also don't have any reports this evening. Are there any items of new business or inquiries by members? Councillor Noyes?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Zanko. My question is about Burger Road, and I know there's been a number of people on town, staff and on council have got some questions about what's going on with Burger Road and the amount of the berm that's being built, the pond that's being dug, and the amount of fill that's being taken in and out, and what it's doing to the road that we just did, I think, last year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just wondering if we can have perhaps Ms. Dolch comment on what actions are going to be coming from the town to look into this.
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor. So we've received a permit today for the fill and site alteration. So we're working through that now. We also, as part of that permit, will take securities to deal with the road issues that we've seen happen. There has been some commitment by the contractor that there will be some repair of that road, but we'll ensure that through the securities. In terms of moving forward, right now we're just confirming with a couple agencies to make sure they're okay with the berm that's being constructed. Once we have that, we would be in a position to issue that permit.
Councillor Noyes?
In regards to that, the permit hasn't been issued. Has there been a stop order now for the trucking back and forth until we know?
So we can't issue a stop work order, but there is a notice of violation that we can issue them under provincial offenses, which will be done tomorrow.
One of the concerns is that the amount of fill that's being brought in, we don't really know what's in the fill. Of course, you know, our imaginations can grow wild and we can think of all sorts of things. But it's a very, very big hole, and there's trucks coming in and out from about 7 o'clock in the morning till about 7 o'clock at night, dumping fill, removing fill and dumping fill. So the residents there are very concerned about what's going into the ground there. So they really want that investigated before it kind of gets out of hand or causes any problems. A lot of those people are on well water and things like that. They're very concerned. But thank you for your explanation.
Does any other member have any inquiries? Your worship? You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Just to follow up with Councillor Noyes' comments, surely there's something that we can do to prevent continuous activity until the application has been processed and the comments from the agencies have been obtained.
Through you to the mayor, in terms of what we can do, like I said, there's charges under the Provincial Offences Act. Obviously, there's a court system procedure for that, but we do have that ability. A permit's been submitted at this point. I don't want to say much more in terms of court action at this point, but again, we will follow up with that tomorrow in terms of the notice of violation, in terms of our bylaw with working without the permit at this point.
If I might, Madam Chair, the suggestion is that this work started prior to a permit being applied for. Is that correct? Right.
That's correct.
Hence the issuance of a notice of violation.
Correct.
And continued work prior to the issuance of or the approval of a permit would constitute a further violation, would it not?
That's correct.
All right, so that would be what the owner needs to be aware of.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll let them, we talked to them briefly today. And we advised them on what else needed to be submitted as part of the permit as well and raised our concerns. So they're aware of them.
Thank you.
Councillor, before I go back to you, Councillor Noyes, does anyone else have any questions? No, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. On the same subject of Burger Road, I'm trying to get my head around that if someone wants to ask for forgiveness, not permission, goes ahead and does what they want to do, knowing, I mean, the people involved in this, they're not new to the system. This is not their, let's just say they have experience working with in this municipality, and they know what's required and what's not required. These are not kind of like babes in the woods in their first attempt, so to speak. They're well aware of what the rules are. So it kind of sounds like they can do whatever they want until they're caught. And when they're caught, all we can do is say, well, that wasn't very nice of you. You don't have a permit. So now you have to go through the permit process. But in the meantime, we can't stop you from doing what you're doing. So go ahead. Like, I know that's not what we're saying, but that's basically the outcome is basically they can continue doing what they're doing. We don't know what they're putting into the ground there. They're continuing to wreck the road. Yes, we're going to put something in the permit to say, well, you have to repair the road. But I mean, how can people just continue to do this, kind of working in spite of the rules, knowing that once the rules apply, the majority of the job's done?
Ms. Gold?
So in terms of that right now, obviously the bylaw that we have in place right now goes through Provincial Offences Act. We can change that and look to change that to the administrative penalty system where there would be a fine associated with that, which is something we're going to look into to discuss further. In terms of our first priority, when we first heard about this, our first concern was, are we going to have a drainage issue on somebody else's property? Keegan immediately went out to the site, determined that the only impact would be on his property. So the concern was a bit mitigated, that it wasn't an urgent situation. But if in the future, we'd like to look at fining immediately, that's something we should consider through the AMP system or the administrative monetary penalty system, because it's the fastest way to get to court for provincial offenses. Can take a year to 2 years at times. So it's not a quick process. It's not an immediate penalty. So that's something we can consider.
Councillor Noyes?
I just want to, if the rest of council has an opportunity of going down Burger Road, it's right by the CN track, you can't miss it. I can't even describe it. It's unbelievable what they've done to that property in such a short period of time. And why they're doing it is a big question too. So, but anyway, that's it.
Does any other members of council have any inquiries? Councillor Lubberts? You're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow up. If I remember correctly, a few years back, we had a similar problem in Oak Hill Forest. Some people were in there and the guy brought in a bunch of fill and built a berm around his house. The neighbors were all complaining. It was all agreed that the berm was illegal, should have never been put there, but that never got removed. Now, these guys are in violation, and you're saying they're in violation of a Provincials Act, provincial fences. If it turns out that we don't like what's in the soil, are we in the ability to tell them to remove the fill that they brought in?
Ms. Dolch?
So in terms of the permit application, they do have to identify where the fill comes from when it's trucked on site. In terms of if there's something wrong with the soil in terms of environmentally wrong, it would be their responsibility to clean it up. We would be contacting the MOE in that instance, letting them know that there's unsafe fill being placed, and they would be responsible for cleanup. If they, for example, right now they've done a number of dump loads for this berm, should the permit not be approved or there's concerns with the permit, they would actually have to remove that fill, even if it was clean fill.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Does any other member of council have any inquiries? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to the business status report. Does any member have any questions? Seeing none, I will hand the chair back to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. That takes us then to infrastructure services, and I believe that's Councillor Noyes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Infrastructure Services is now in session. There are no presentations and delegations. That brings us to report number IS 31-2020, contract extension for conventional transit services.
So moved.
Okay, any comments or questions? Seeing none, Mayor Redekop.
Just one question. I note in the report that we did a public transit survey in 2016, and I'm wondering if we're contemplating doing something of a similar nature within the next several months.
Madam Chair, I think that's on the radar for us. We're looking at significant changes in the way transit is provided within the window that the current contract is for, and I think a survey of our patrons is paramount to that.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? I have one. There was some reference made to looking into an on-call possibility, and I'm just wanting some more an explanation on that. What exactly would that entail?
Madam Chair, there's a number of providers that provide this type of service. Essentially, it's a glorified taxi service wherein we subsidize most of the ride. The patron is responsible for the first $3 in today's fare structure, but essentially it's a taxi. They call a central number. We've looked at a couple different systems, and they're very similar in the way they operate, in that if it's not a solo taxi, but if there's a ride along the way that needs to go somewhere, they have algorithms that can optimize their routes, but essentially it's stop-to-stop service as we have now, but in a more efficient manner.
Thank you. Now if I call a taxi service and I have about 4 hours to wait, it's going to cost me, let's say $20 to get from Stevensville to Crystal Beach and back. For this on-call system, we wouldn't be looking at those type of rates, minus the $3 each direction.
No, the patron would be responsible for the bus fare, the $3, and the town, as we're spending, approximately $1 million a year on transit service, would go down a little, but we're still looking at the same ballpark, but a more efficient service, and we feel that a more efficient service will bring in more ridership.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, that brings us to new business inquiries.
Madam Chair, we need to vote on that. We need to vote on the report.
All those in favor of the report? The report carries. That brings us to new business inquiries. And there was one by Councillor Butler at the July 13th, 2020. This council committee meeting about Bernard Beach. Somebody, Kelly, Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. Madam Chair, Councillor Butler inquired about the status of the Bernard Beach storm outlet cover at that meeting. We did have a project included in the 2019 capital program. The project has been draft designed. We were looking to host an online comment section early this spring. COVID derailed our plans on that. We're somewhat getting back to a normal schedule now. So we'll be hosting that same online comment period in the fall and looking for construction shortly thereafter, pending no showstoppers out of the comment period.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, do you need any more explanation?
No, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That brings us to new business status report. Any comments or questions?
Well, I have some,
Councillor Butler.
Councillor Butler.
yes. Can we just ask some questions for new business?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
New business inquiries.
Thanks.
Anyone have new business? Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I know that there has been an issue with respect to rodent problems down in the Ridgeway downtown core at Dominion and Ridge Road. And I know that Mr. Walsh has been working diligently to identify the solutions. And I'm just wondering if you could share that with us tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we, the week before last, we had Orkin Pest Control go for a walk through the area with us. They identified a number of issues in the area, and most had to do with garbage cans out behind the businesses. They noted that they needed to be cleaned up. These are all private issues that the town can't really enforce right now. They're not breaking any bylaws, certainly, but there's certainly room for improvement. And until businesses get their garbage in order, the gentleman from Orkin said there's really not much he can do. He noted a few opportunities for improvement. One of the things he noted at a couple of establishments was that they had the doors open for heat exhaustion. We all know it's been a very hot summer, and I appreciate that, but that in itself is a rodent attractant. So if businesses could make their establishments a little more airtight, that would help as well.
And I understand, Madam Chair, if I may, that that there have been a lot of problems with garbage on the streets where individuals are dumping their own personal garbage rather than patrons of the street. And that creates a problem as well. Is that correct?
Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, he noticed, our Orkin representative noted that a few garbage cans were overfilled, and taking a look at them, they were personal garbage or refuse from takeout restaurants. One of the things he noted was that if that garbage could be kept inside the restaurant, that would help a lot as well.
And I know that currently we have MTerra coming in twice a week to take out the garbage, but on the streets. Is there anything that we can do to monitor the situation to capture those individuals that are abusing cans, or is that nothing that
we don't have video monitoring down there, and even if we did, I don't know if we could identify individuals. You'd almost have to catch them red-handed.
Okay, all right, thank you. And if I may, I have a couple of other questions not related to that problem, but I understand that the signage is coming, and I have been approached by a lot of walkers on the beach who have dogs on their leash and are doing it properly. Is there an opportunity to change the bylaw to allow for people who have dogs to walk on the beach with leash on. Well, currently, the bylaw states that you can't take your dog on the beach.
Kara, would that be you in regards to bylaw?
Oh, sorry. I thought it was infrastructure. I apologize.
Well,
No, that's okay. So in terms of, right now, the bylaw, that's what it says. There's no dogs permitted on the beach. We would have to amend that, should council wish to do so. We could bring that forward as a request, but right now, that's the bylaw we have in place.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Butler? Anything further?
Madam Chair, could I just interject on that
Mayor
point?
Redekop?
You have to appreciate the fact that the only beach that you can really walk on that we own publicly would be Bay Beach, which is 1,000 feet. The other beaches are 66 feet wide, so that most of the beaches that people are walking on are actually private beaches, which
Yes.
we have no control over. And I'm not sure we want to encourage people to necessarily walk their dog. As it is, people walk their dogs there now. Some people ride their horses. They don't necessarily clean up after their horses. So I think we need to bear that in mind as well. If
Yeah,
we're,
that's a very good point.
okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No,
Did you have
that's
another
thank you.
question?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
That brings us to the business status report. Any comments or questions?
Councillor Noyes, if I may, really quick, I had a new business inquiry.
Okay, Councillor Dubanow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Walsh, I've had a few residents reach out to me recently about the traffic calming study that we approved back during the budget. And I know with COVID, you know, things have been kind of topsy-turvy. Is there any update on that? Do we have any plan when that's going to start or anything along those lines? I thought I'd ask.
Mr. Walsh?
I'll take Councillor. So through you, Madam Chair, we had a number of studies deferred when COVID hit, not knowing the economic impact of COVID and how it would affect town finances. So ironically, Mr. Jansen, Tom, Ms. Dolch, and myself had a meeting this afternoon, and we've put those put projects such as that. There was the traffic calming study, rural speed limit study, the Gorham corridor study, and the Black Creek third egress study. So they're all back on the burner now. I'll be speaking with manager of engineering, Tim Marata, a little later, and we'll work up a schedule to get those going, but they have been deferred and they are green lighted again.
Councillor Dubanow?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. That's fantastic news. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us back. I'm now going to check to make sure nobody else has their hand up. The business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services is now closed, and I'll turn the chair back to Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. That takes us to corporate and community services. Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We have no presentations and delegations. We have no reports. Are there some new business inquiries? Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Yeah, I just wanted to provide an update really quickly to council and the public on the changes with regard to gaming in Fort Erie. The gaming board had a meeting last week. Unfortunately, I was only in attendance for the last half of the presentation, but I did get some information that I wanted to share. So the gaming centers reopened on July 24th. We have what we call cabinet games, which are the tactics machines, and they're only a limit of 50 people inside at a time. As revenue begins to flow, it's obvious that the numbers are going to be less than what we saw before COVID. But for the first 2 months, there will be no volunteers on site. That is going to be reassessed 6 weeks from now to see where we go. There's been some information from the OLG and the OCPA that they'll be allocating funds based on the financial situation of the organization and the community need. So what they did is they sent out a survey, asked those questions to the individual organizations, and I've just notes here. organizations that provide counseling services, food banks, organizations that utilize lottery funds to assist with utility bills, and organizations that provide services to specific segments of the community were all given high priority. Community events and schools were given a low priority. Organizations that scored low, their allocations were reallocated to higher organizations. Organizations that had a medium score on the matrix remain the same. So I just wanted to give that update. I'm sure there'll be people asking questions as things move forward. And certainly if council has any questions, they can relay them to me. You know, I would ask, you know, ask your question here, get it on the record, and fire me off an email, and we can go back to the gaming board and get that information and also bring it publicly as well.
Chair, could I ask a question?
Your worship?
Would it be possible to, for councillors, I know the minutes won't be coming forward for a bit, but would it be possible for councillors to receive a synopsis of the items that were discussed so that we've got a handle on this? Because some of us are asked questions by the nonprofit section. So it would be helpful because this is very, very interesting and informative and helpful information.
Yeah, Your Worship, through you, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, I can certainly get that information for you and circulate it to council. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Noyes?
Yes, thank you, Councillor McDermott. Actually, this is along the same lines as from Councillor Dubanow. And Councillor Dubanow, if you've answered it before, forgive me, but you kind of came in and out. So I'm not sure if I'm asking you a question that you've actually explained quite well. When you talk about the allocations and the surveys, was that done by the OLG and was the scoring done by them, or is that something we're doing in-house? In regards to rating which organization should get money or not, I didn't hear the beginning of that.
Councillor Dubanow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay right now? Am I breaking in and out, or?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I moved my microphone around. The scoring, the OLG and the OCGA gave us the ability to score that way. And then we sent out surveys that asked the specific questions that they put forward. And then we scored them internally in-house here. And part of the meeting that we had last week is we went through the matrix. We went through how everything was scored with each individual organization. And then they were notified of the results. I believe that was today they were notified.
Can we get a copy of the survey and the questions on it?
I'd have to take that back to the board and make the request, but I would be happy to do that for you, Councillor Noyes.
Again, and I'm sure this is going to come up at some other point in the future. I don't understand why things that are, like the survey isn't confidential. Obviously it's not, because it was given to all the non-for-profit organizations. So I don't understand why council, well, you have to go back to the gaming corporation and ask permission to share with council information that is out there in the public. I don't quite understand that.
Councillor Dubanow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate where Councillor Noyes is coming from. I'm only one member of that board. I don't speak on behalf of the whole board. I'm just a single member there. So I'm doing my best to handle my role as a gaming board member and also my role as a councillor here as well. So to that end, I can make the request, and if the request is fine, I will be happy to provide it. I'm trying to balance here. I don't even have a copy of it, to be perfectly honest. So I'd have to go and ask.
If I can continue, I've been in your shoes, so I know the position you're being put in. But again, I go back to the gaming corporation as an employee of the town of Fort Erie. They really aren't in a position to tell council as an employee, no, we're not going to provide that information. But I'll leave it at that. I'm sure we'll be looking into, but I do have another question not related to Councillor Dubanow's comments. But
Okay,
I do have,
Councillor Noyes. And then we'll go to Councillor Butler.
okay, and I did notice in the minutes of the meeting, from Mr. Cookett in regards to the staff meeting and the COVID-19 staff meeting, that there was $83 million allocated to not-for-profit organizations. So it kind of hits on the end of Councilor Dubanow's comments. And I did have I saw that Mrs. Grumman also brought it up in it's called Resilient Community Fund, was also in the minutes there. So I looked up the Resilient Community Fund, and I read it several times. I'm still somewhat confused. In the parameters that they give, it doesn't seem like there's any dollars available to non-for-profit organizations for things like daily maintenance, paying their taxes, ongoing repairs and things like that. It seems like the majority of that $83 million, if I read the points well, it's more for administration training, improved technology, and programming. So I'm happy to hear Councilor Dubanow say that there's perhaps another pot of money coming through the OLG and gaming to the different organizations. But is there any way to clarify with with the non-for-profit organizations, I read it several times, and I still wasn't clear on exactly what I could apply for and what I couldn't apply for this fund. It's gone through. Is there any kind of a checklist to say, okay, if you need it for this, yes, you can have it. This falls under administration. Yes, you can have it. This falls under programming. Yes, you can have it. This falls under improved technology or improved communication. Is there any checklist that would be easier to understand than the government website?
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. That's definitely something we'll look into. There was a bunch of funding announcements last week. We've put them on our radar. They'll be before the grants oversight team. We're going to review what grants are there, what they're available for. If you have specific questions, if you want to send those through to me, we'll make sure that we look into it further. If need be, we'll reach out to the province for clarification on those funds.
I didn't hear the last 10 words, but I think you're going to get back to me on it if I give you specific questions.
That's exactly right. If you can hear me now, if you can provide me with specific questions, I'll reach out to the.
Okay, no problem. I'll email them to you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Jansen, did you want to hop in there?
Yeah, just through you, Chair. If you did see the announcement, you're right. It was very limited options with what could be provided. The Ontario Trillium Foundation website does have a more detailed list of eligibility requirements and program eligibility as well. So I know we did send out some information through our social media channel, I believe, on that one, but there is more information on the Ontario Trillium Foundation website specific to that program.
Okay, thank you. I'll look there.
Councilor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. First, I'd like to start with the SPCA and get a follow-up with respect to some of the requests that I made at the last council meeting with a more robust report, for example, and a few of the other items that I had requested. Has the CEO been able to speak to the SPCA with respect to those items?
Mr. Cookett.
Yes, through you, Chair, to the councillor, so I can provide you a bit of an update. As you know, I have reached out to, I'm hoping you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, I reached out to the province again today, the Provincial Animal Welfare Services. This is the same group that I reached out to back in July, asking them if they could please provide answers to the questions. I have not heard back, so I've been waiting quite a while. I think they're running it past their legal department to see what they can provide me. If I'll go through it FYI if I have to. As far as your other questions or comments that you had made previously, I was under the understanding that those would come back as sorry, can you not hear me?
Yeah.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I thought your request would be coming through as a motion to staff. We would be very detailed and specific on your request. I can say that you were looking for us to review the current agreement to see what was required in revising that agreement. You were asking for us to review the finances and what we pay the SPCA and do a benchmark comparison to the other SPCA. So these are things that we are looking at, but I was waiting for the formal motion to come forward before I move forward with those.
Okay, that's not a problem. I just want to make sure that helps me in the direction that I'm going to go for the motions then.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And if I may, I have a couple of other questions, Mr. Chair, with respect to the BIA. I don't know about the other BIAs within the township, but I know that we are struggling in Ridgeway to get members to stay on and to join the BIA. And I think that partially the problem stems from the COVID virus and the effects that it's having on the local businesses. And so their ability to volunteer is somewhat limited. And I wonder if maybe there would be an opportunity to expand the bylaw in the future to be able to have, the general public, just like we have the other committees, but to have the general public who would be well suited to sit on the Business Improvement Association that would add value, and maybe retirees that could help and move that instead of having a business or facility that one owns. Would that be a possibility to consider?
Mr. Cookett?
Sure, I'll take that, and Ms. Schofield may want to jump in as well. So we can take a look at that. I know right now that the current bylaw does allow for one individual to sit on the BIA, so we could look at expanding that. I think those would be discussions that we would want to have with the BIA and make sure that they're in agreement with how we move forward. Unfortunately, right now, Ms. Watson, who looked after our committees and our BAs, recently resigned from us. So we're looking at refilling that position. I think Ms. Schofield has her hands full right now. So, but I don't see an issue with us looking at that. I can't confirm a time, to be honest with you. When
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Your worship.
Thank you.
Yeah, since I'm a member, as a business owner in a BIA, the concern that I would have would be, since we are levied and have to pay a levy each year, I'd be a little concerned about having, as an example, a majority of board members on the BIA that aren't business owners, making decisions with respect to how much a levy should be, what the levy should be spent on. So that would be, I think it would be very important for us to make sure that we consult all of the members of the BI, all of the BIAs as we move forward in something of this nature. Because really the purpose of the BIA is to improve that area or municipal property within that area. And if the business people aren't interested, it's hard to imagine people outside that business area taking on that responsibility if the business people themselves don't see the benefit of organizing in that fashion. I think your comment, Councillor Butler, is probably correct that it's likely COVID and the impact that it's had on businesses right now, because it's created a lot of stress for a lot of business people.
Well, I was speaking, I don't know if you can hear me, but I was speaking to a few of the members, and their suggestion is perhaps there are retired business people living in the Ridgeway area that could assist in guiding and hosting events when the virus is over. But your point is well taken. It's a tough one, and I think that a lot of businesses in that downtown core are looking to have us, look at two options: either disband the BIA completely, or find a solution to bring more members on board.
It's usually cyclical. My experience has been that it goes in cycles where sometimes you've got a lot of interest, sometimes there'll be a lot of interest in one area, not in another area, and then it changes around. But yeah, it's a concern for sure.
Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, thank you.
Councillor Zanko?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to Mr. Cookett, just further to Councillor Butler's inquiry regarding the provincial audit for the SPCA, wouldn't it be maybe faster to reach out to the SPCA directly and ask them for a full copy?
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I definitely could do that. You know, I could either reach out to them or our council rep on the SPCA. I'm looking at Councillor Lubberts, if he'd be interested in providing that to us as well. I was hoping that I wouldn't have to reach out to the manager only because they would have to take it before their board to get approval. And I thought, you know, by reaching out to the province, I would get it directly from them and the whole process would be expedited. But foolish me, I didn't get it and I probably should have reached out directly to them. But I would look at Councillor Lubberts if he'd be interested in providing that to me, or I would reach out to the manager of the SPCA and see if that can be provided.
Anything further, Councillor Zanko?
No, thank you.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, if you're looking, are you talking about the review that was just done recently? I'm hearing different story, an audit. I don't know that we were audited.
Mr. Cookett?
Yeah, I believe that's
I'm
what,
not sure
I
what
want to
Mr.
speak to the
Cook is
councillor, but
looking
I
for.
believe that's what we had, the province had received complaints regarding the operation, the SPCA. They went in and did it. It's not an audit, I would say more of an investigation regarding the allegations that were made. So I believe that's what Councillor Butler, I know, was looking for, and I'm not sure if that's what Councillor Zanko is looking for, but is the province review regarding the complaints that they received.
Well, also, just to clarify, I don't know if I'm,
Yep.
just to clarify, we're also looking for the financial audit, or the financials too, to let us know exactly what the spend is and how that's being allocated.
Yes, and through you, Chair, I can speak to that. We've reached out to them regarding the financial audit, which we typically would have got in the spring. And because of COVID, the audit was done late, and I believe right now they're waiting to have a board meeting to get approval to circulate that to the town. So it's behind schedule. We typically would have had this months ago. I can reach out to them and see where the status of that is. I'm hoping to receive it very shortly. I know Mr. Jansen as well has been so.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The financials right now, they have been done, but before the SPCA can release them, we have to have our AGM and approve them. And with the COVID and the provinces put us under a state of emergency, we got notice that the AGM doesn't have to be done until 6 months after the emergency is lifted. So, but now that we're in phase 3, we can have bigger gatherings. So we're getting prepared to have our annual general meeting sooner than later, but I don't have a date for that. As far as the review and with the complaints, that was done, and Mr. Cookett, the SPCA has provided you with the report that we got, and the gentleman that was at the SPCA said that it was a very good facility, and he made recommendations that we add a drug when we're euthanizing wildlife. Don't get wildlife mixed up with cats and dogs, which is what's in our animal control bylaw. This was outside the animal control bylaw, and it's for wildlife. And it was a recommendation that the SPCA followed through with. And so they've ordered that drug, and any wildlife that's going to be euthanized will be given that drug first. And so that there has been done. I was under the understanding that the manager had sent that report to Mr. Cookett. And if the agency that did the report is not complying with what Mr. Cookett is asking for, let's just all remember, that's not the SPCA. The SPCA was investigated, a report was given to the SPCA, and the agency that did the review, that's the agency that Mr. Cookett is trying to contact, not the SPCA. And if they're not giving the information, they may be looking at their legal department to see what information can they legally give out to the town, because the town of Fort Erie, although we deal with the SPCA, they're a corporation just like any other corporation. They're an individual just like any other individual. So when it comes to asking for information, when you did an investigation, it's not just that simple that the agency just gives you that information. They're a provincial agency. So they have to decide whether they're going to give that information to the town or not. Has nothing to do with the SPCA. They're not involved in nobody contacting Mr. Cookett. But I will speak with the manager, but I'm under the impression that that report was given to Mr. Cookett.
Mr. Cookett?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Just to be clear, what I did receive was a small paragraph in an email, which wasn't an investigation as I would call it. I would think it would be something on a formal report by the province, dates, times, who they investigate and so forth. This was a simple 3-line or 4-line paragraph in an email. So I was looking for something a little more substantial from the inspector who actually did the investigation.
Well, Mr. Cookett, what you got is what the SPCA received. So let's not look at the SPCA here. That's what the SPCA received from the individual that did the investigating. So they forwarded what they received from the individual. So let's make sure that you're not confusing us and saying the SPCA is not doing the job, because they gave you what they were given.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just find it interesting that only a paragraph would be issued to the SPCA and that would be the sole sharing of information. And to me, that just kind of raises some red flags in terms of what was the investigation about and what actually was the focus. So was it just one? I mean, an investigation could be a number of different things, but it could also be one thing or two things or three things. So I think that that's probably what we need to find out is what was the basis of the investigation and why was there an investigation?
Well,
A
again,
report to me is wholesome. A report isn't a paragraph.
again, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
that needs to be brought to the individual that did the investigation, not the SPCA. When they were called in to do the investigation, they received a complaint and they followed through with that complaint. They came to the SPCA and did an investigation. The SPCA was just as much in the dark as everybody else.
Right.
It's
And
the
that's
agency
true.
that came into the
Okay.
SPCA.
Point of order, Chair.
That's why we have to ask these questions.
Point of order,
not the
Chair.
SPCA.
Just let me get everybody stopped here a second. Your point of order, Mayor Redekop?
I think we need to have one person speaking at a time, and I think the person that speaks is the person that's recognized by the chair. So I think you were about to do that in any event.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Cookett, let's go back to you. Are we pretty much clear on the information that the councillor is looking for?
Through you, Chair, yes, I am. I'm looking for a fulsome report that states what the allegations were, what the investigation, when the investigation took place, what was the result of each one of those complaints received by the province. That's what I'm looking for, is a fulsome report. That's why I've reached out to the province and did not reach out to the SPCA. I would like to get it right from the province. I will continue to send them emails until I get that information. If it ends up being just one paragraph, then so be it, but I need to hear that right from the province.
Okay, so will this meet the needs of both Councillor Butler and Councillor Zanko then? What Mr. Cook has just stated? That's good with you? Somebody?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So let's move on from that. Are there any more new inquiries? Seeing none, we'll move on to.
Chair.
Yes. Sorry, Your Worship.
No, that's fine. I just want to circle back to where we started, which is with respect to the Gaming Corporation. And I just want to make sure that we've got some clarity here, because I tend to agree that Councillor Dubanow is in a difficult situation, but I'd like to get some clarity from the CAO, if we could, as to the nature of the relationship between the town of Fort Erie and the manager of gaming services, whom I believe is an employee of the municipality.
Through your chair to the mayor, you're absolutely correct. The manager is an employee of the town, not of their corporation. There is an agreement between the town and the corporation. We have reviewed that prior and received comment from our solicitor at the time. It's on my pile, our workload, to revisit that. I would love for the manager to come and do a presentation before council, and just all the revisions and changes that have been made. And as well as I would like to get an opinion from a solicitor on this corporation and what the council has as far as authority in dealing with this corporation.
I think that would be very helpful, because there seems to be some confusion as to the nature of the relationship between the municipality and the gaming corporation, which acts upon policy that we provide and was created by the municipal council. So thank you very much for that clarification.
Anything further, Your Worship?
No, thank you.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on the mayor's comment, my understanding is that if I made a request through you right now to Ms. Gress to perhaps provide the copy of that survey right now, I think as a formal council request, that you would be able to pass that through to Ms. Gress, and that information could be brought back to council. So if I made that formal request to you right now, Mr. Cookett, is that something you can speak with Ms. Gress about and then have that information provided back to council?
Through your chair to the councillor, I'd be happy to make the request. I have a feeling that Ms. Grace would likely want to take it before the board before she would release that information. But I will definitely make the request. I'll make it tomorrow morning.
And if I could follow up, Mr. Chair, I think it may be more operational rather than board related, because I think she was the one who actually worked on the survey along with town staff. So I think we may get that information a little sooner, with my understanding the way it was done. So if you make the request, I think Councillor Noyes might be pleasantly surprised by how quickly it can be sent out.
Yes, if I could just add through you, Chair.
Yes.
Councillor Noyes makes a very good point. I mean, it's not a confidential document. It's a survey that was sent out. So I don't see the issue with sharing it.
I don't either, if I could follow up. It's just I'm in a tough spot. I'm trying to do my role here as a councillor and speak for the residents of the community, but I'm also a board member of a separate corporation. So I'm in a tough spot, and I appreciate that the mayor recognizes that. I'm just trying to follow proper channels and do what my obligation is in my role.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on making formal requests, would it be better if we put forward a motion to request that information? That way we're giving Mr. Cook a direction from council, and it's a little more formal.
Who do I go to? Ms. Scofield.
Through you, Chair, that could be one avenue. Normally, when you're asking a staff member to do something in council and committee, you would ask for a vote of council to make sure that they were in agreement to
Yeah.
have that undertaken. The other way that I was initially looking at this was it's a response to an inquiry made under new business under committee. So we could do it either way. Ms. Gress could respond through what we typically call the push sheet, a response to inquiry, or you could make it more formal if you wish.
Well, I'm pretty much thinking that this inquiry is something that will be answered right away. I really don't suspect it would need a motion. But go ahead, Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Ms. Schofield. And I just a suggestion, so I'll leave it up to Councillor Noyes if she wants to make the request or if she wants to make a motion, whichever way we're going to do it. Fine with me.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I'm comfortable with Mr. Cookett to get, if he can get the information, it's a simple request to Grace, and we get the information, I think then that's the problem solved. I think there's bigger issues than this, than just this particular survey. But I think for immediacy, that's what I would like to see, the survey. And I think the vote's not really necessary. Unless we can't get it, then.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. So, Mr. Cookett, we'll get on that then?
Yeah, so just to be clear, you would like the survey and the scoring that took place?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we move on to the, unless anybody has further inquiries, we'll get on to the business status report. Seeing none, Your Worship, the session's closed.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Well done, well managed. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Any meetings that anyone wishes to announce? Councillor Noyes.
Yes, there's a meeting tomorrow, August the 11th at 3:30 p.m. for the Accessibility Committee. I think it's going to be a Zoom meeting.
Sure it is. No, it's not.
I'm not sure because I was gone last
Schofield.
week.
Ms. Schofield may know.
I missed one of the emergency team meetings, but I read in the minutes, I believe that Ms. Bradnam had indicated that they were not meeting as a committee, but they were going to provide some comment as stakeholders. So
This is a meeting. This is not a formal meeting. A meeting of the members to provide some input.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a meeting.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing, thank you.
Anyone else? I have a meeting on Friday with the president of the Niagara Health System to talk about some issues relative to Fort Erie. And I'll keep you posted as to what comes out of that meeting. And then, of course, next week, we have the virtual Association of Municipalities of Ontario meeting. And some of you will be involved in some of our meetings with the Minister of Heritage, the Minister of Long-Term Care, and there's one other meeting. Mr. Cookett, do you know who that is with?
We made 3 requests. One was high-speed internet, the long-term care, and then Miller Creek Marina project, the support for. We received 2 approved meetings. We did not receive one as of yet for high-speed internet.
Okay, and I have a meeting as part of the regional delegation as well with the Minister of Long-Term Care. We'll undoubtedly be discussing the project in Fort Erie, the new Gilmore Lodge. So if there are no other meetings, then is there anyone that would like to move that we adjourn? Councillor Dubanow.
No.
Would you move that we adjourn then, please?
I would be happy to move that, Your Worship.
And that's at 7:11 p.m. All those in favor? None opposed. That is unanimous. Good way to end a meeting. Thank you all.